generations. So she figures with the sort of new fabrics we have today and all that, there's a way to kind of reimagine it from a product point of view, which of course she goes and does. But here's the thing that she does that most entrepreneurs and innovators don't do. She doesn't call it control top pantyhose 2.0, which is what we do in the tech business. She calls it, anybody know what the category is called? Shapewear. And so Spanx is the pioneer of shapewear. And shapewear isn't the nasty corset or control top or whatever that your grandmother wore. It's the thing that we now wear today, right? And it's a multi-billion-dollar market cap company started by one gal in Atlanta because she wanted to look better in her jeans or dress or whatever the fuck it was she was going to go wear to that party that night. And she got all three parts of the triangle right. She did build a great product that, I'm told, many women love. She built a company that could scale and deliver that product. She hasn't sold that company to Nike or I don't know who. And she went out into the world and she educated women about why shapewear mattered, that it solved a particular problem in a very unique way, and in particular, how it was different from what came before. And so that's what legendary category designers really do. They teach us to think about a problem in the way that we do, the way that they do. And to get back to your question around point of view, they come up with a story about that. And I just gave you my interpretation of her story, and I might be off a little, but it doesn't matter that I'm off. What matters is that she created that point of view, she went out and evangelized that point of view, and somehow I even know it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what legendary category designers do. And whether you're designing shapewear or a new piece of enterprise software or a new medical device or your own career as an accountant or a doctor, it's all three of those things that matter together. And when the world gets it, because you have a point of view that articulates a problem and they identify with it, pow, they're here.
So I have a lot more questions, but I think that my part of this time is up, and I want to, you'll probably talk about more versus different. You did a bit, but I love the distinction between that, so hopefully you can answer that in the context of somebody else's question. But I would invite everyone now to ask your questions if you have specifically business-related questions. Oh, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Business-related questions or personal, professional questions or any other question that you might think of that you want to pose. Please go ahead. We have probably about half an hour for questions. So, Charlotte, the floor is yours.
So, what if you work for a company that solves many different problems? How do you choose the one problem that's going to define your point of view and carve out your category?
As a company, are those problems all targeted at the same market?
No. In market in terms of the same audience?
Yes.
No.
So in that case, each product, you need to do category design in all of them.
And so category design requires one audience?
Or
Can
or
you-
a deeply connected one.
Okay.
You know, if you're selling tires and you're selling candy, those are completely different things. So you got to be clear about that. Now, I will say, Charlotte, most companies that we have talked to think what you just said is true,
Yeah.
and it's fucking not.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
And the other thing that I'll say to just be really, really clear is there's no such thing as multiple point of views for the same thing. That is to say, the category that you design and the point of view that you evangelize is the same for customers, it's the same for partners, it's the same for investors, it's the same for employees. Of course, there's a tilt here and there, of course, but the core of it is exactly the same. The languaging is exactly the same, and at the strategic level, it's tight.
yep.
Do you want to ask a more specific question, or is that?
No, I can keep going, but I'll let other.
Okay. Did you want to give maybe the macromedia example, or because that's kind of what Charlotte's talking about, right? Or no? Just move on.
It's up to Charlotte.
Okay.
I'll read the book.
Okay. All right. Kira.
So early on, you talked about LinkedIn profiles screaming features. In your educated opinion, what should they scream? Like a point of view or a story or
You
a
should have
difference?
a point of view
Yeah. Okay.
that frames a problem that you're uniquely qualified to solve.
Nice.
The other one, and this is just a pet peeve, it's got nothing to do with category design. Why the fuck's it written in the third person? We all know you wrote it! What? But that's just me.
I love it. Thank you.
My LinkedIn profile starts off with, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
Because you know I wrote it.
Right.
Oh, I
Nice.
don't know, you're in charge.
Oh no, you can go ahead, Ron.
So when people do try to create the category and frame the problem, I mean, classically people worry about missionary selling. It's hard to convince people of your point of view. What, when you have multiple companies or whatever competing to do that, what makes the winner?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question, but I want to address the context of your question first. New categories by definition are $0 billion markets, so they are evangelist selling. Well, everybody goes, well, why the fuck would you want to? That's crazy. Okay, so launch your product or service into a market that exists. When you understand category king economics, what you understand in the tech business is that one company gets 76% of the economics. In the consumer products industry, it turns out it's even more than that. One of the companies we profile in our book is a company called Living Essentials, the creator of 5-Hour Energy. They created a whole new category called the energy shot. It's not next to Monster and Gatorade. It's not next to coffee. It's not next to Coke. It's in its own place, right? They're the only company in history to have 5 SKUs or more at the Walmart checkout. Their cost per ounce, or their revenue per ounce is like 10 or 12 times that of Coke's. They created a whole new category. Today that category is over $1 billion, and their revenue in that category is about $1.8 billion.
Wait, what?
It's a $2 billion
Oh,
plus
$2 billion.
category. Well,
Okay.
did I say
You
something?
said a billion.
Two, I meant 2.
Yeah. Okay. So
Alright.
out of $2 billion, they
Out of
have
$2 billion, they have
1.8.
$1.8 billion.
Okay.
Okay? And so, here's the thing. If you're going to launch your product or service or your career, and you're going to position yourself in an existing space, somebody else designed that space. By definition, you're playing somebody else's game. Would you rather be Bob Marley or the 400th reggae band?
But that's really hard to do.
Yeah, well, welcome to the world that we live in. I mean,
And so how do you successfully do it if you
Yeah.
go after creating a category?
Assuming more than one person starts.
so the most important thing is to have a different, and I use that word on purpose, point of view. The trap that everybody falls into is they have a better conversation. Our carbidingulator is faster, better, cheaper. When there's an existing category king, people go, so what? Apple has 90% of the profits in the smartphone business. The only reason Android is there is because Google gives that shit away because they want the advertising. That's it. I'm not saying that was a bad strategy for them. It was a genius strategy for them. But they don't have any economics in the smartphone business. Because one company gets all the economics. And so, whether you realize it or not, when you launch a product, service, or your career in an existing category that was designed by somebody else, the best case scenario is you're playing for 25% of the economics. Best. And so legendary entrepreneurs, the way they win is they develop a point of view predicated on an insight around a problem, and they articulate that point of view really powerfully, and they get the world to accept their category design. If you go back and read the Time Magazine interview with Zuckerberg when he was Time Magazine's Person of the Year, what he says is, I wanted to create a social network that mimicked the relationships we have in the real world. Trusted relationships with real people in a way that they could truly connect. At the time, MySpace was the leader. And what was on MySpace?
Bunch of porn.
A bunch of crazy bullshit. Fake profiles and weird ass shit and music, and it was just a complete, if you remember it, it was a complete fuck jumble. Right? And most of the friend requests, they didn't call it that, they called it something else, but whatever they called it were like from fake people or weird people, like people you had no connection to, right? And so he crushed MySpace and Tribe and Friendster and all of those people because he had, the problem that he was trying to solve was, how do we in the best way possible digitally recreate what all of us are doing tonight? That's what he wanted to do. I don't know what the hell those other guys were trying to do. Somehow we all understood that. And that's why Facebook is Facebook. And so I think, Ron, the answer to your question is get very clear about that point of view and evangelize the shit out of it. And if the world connects with that point of view, you're going to be the category king in that space.
Oh, Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason. I'm a musician and that aspect of my life has gotten a lot out of this. But there was a mention of dyslexia earlier,
Yeah.
and you live with that.
Yes, every fucking second of the day.
Yes. Okay. I teach high school at a private high school in Berkeley that caters specifically to kids with learning differences, and dyslexia is a big issue there. So I'm curious if you personally have applied any of this reframing of the problem thinking to your own personal living with dyslexia or whatever it is, and has that given you some kind of insight to how can I reframe this problem and sort of resell it to myself as a way to get over it? And maybe this is a two-layer question. The other thing I'm interested is in if you have any opinions about in this triangle the dynamic of the exchange of leadership between these 3 points, and which one leads,
very good.
and when do they lead.
Very good.
And they have to work together in understanding that very real dynamic of leadership, and that it's in flux constantly and it's always changing. So
Yes.
that's my question.
Yeah, that's a big question. So on the first question, are you interested more in my personal experience or in how what I think about dyslexia?
I'm just curious if that triggered anything for you, like, oh yeah, I reframed my own problem in this way and it helped me.
Or did you
I'm just
reframe
wondering
your
if you
point of view
reflected at all on
about
this.
No.
Okay.
My relationship with it, the minute I found out I was dyslexic, and it was actually Christine who discovered it, my whole world changed in that second. And then going forward, I was 21 at the time, going forward, because I was aware of it, it made it easier and easier, particularly around my own acceptance of it and my own willingness to be vulnerable about it. So if you send me a spreadsheet, I'm not gonna fucking look at it, okay? Now, if I need to look at it, you know, and I, with all due modesty, was the chief marketing officer of a $6 billion company, I had to look at a spreadsheet every once in a while. Somebody needed to sit down and walk me through that spreadsheet. And I said, hey, who can sit down and walk me through this spreadsheet? And the people in my life have to tolerate a lot. I never know where the fucking keys are, right? And a whole slew of other things. I remember Christine and I were on a vacation years ago in Europe, and she got mad at me because I never wanted to tip anybody or deal with money in Europe. And I said to her, well, sweetheart, I can't do the math. I don't know whether I'm tipping the guy a cent or $20 million. And the minute she understood that, she dealt with the physical money. If I'm out to dinner with you and I'm paying or we're splitting the bill, whatever it is, when the bill comes, sometimes I can figure out the tip, but sometimes I can't. And so sometimes I'll say, hey, what should we tip this gal? You know, so all of those things. And then, so that's on the personal side. I haven't done much about it other than some stuff on Quora and some speeches and spending some time with some kids, but nothing of substance. But what I've learned about dyslexia is it infuriates me that people call it a disability. And I heard you call it a difference. And there's a couple, I'm forgetting their names now, they wrote a book called The Dyslexic Advantage. They're both PhDs and they're over in Berkeley. I now have more time in my life, which we can talk about if you like, but I want to go spend some time with them because they believe, having researched dyslexia, if they could choose, they would choose the dyslexic mind. Mm-hmm. So here's what I know. We have huge, huge advantages, and we have massive disadvantages. I'm gifted in like half a thing over here and retarded in everything else. But if you can focus on that thing, it's amazing how many musicians are. It's amazing how many people, creators of one sort or another. It's amazing how many entrepreneurs are, right? Because we see different shit. And that's incredibly powerful. The tragedy for me is our education system is one hammer, one nail. And what happens, and I've seen it, you know way better than I do, is if at some point, you know, for me it was around 11 or 12, the whole world of math, science, even geography, chemistry, like, forget it. That's going from C's to F's, and you're a moron. And if there isn't some other world that you can find that opens up for you, like really bad things happen to that person. And I mean, I love my mother for lots of reasons, but one of them was she figured out, she didn't know I was dyslexic. I'm 48 years old. In the 70s, we had no fucking clue. But she knew there was a problem, and she knew I wasn't a fucking retard. And so she put me in a school. She found a school that was 50% music, art, and drama. And so guess what? I was the lead in the play all the time. I was in a touring rock band at 14. I grew up in Montreal, Canada. The legal drinking age there is 18, but it's merely a suggestion. And by the way, if somebody could bring me another beer, I would love it. But my point is for that square, like, we need to cultivate the magic that people who have different ways of learning have.
I love that whole answer about the reframing of the individual problem, even because it reflects out to, you know, whatever's going on with the individual reflects out to whatever we project into the world.
And there's no amount of work you're going to do with me that's going to get me to do long division. Ask my Uncle Terry.
Right. And then the other thing I just wanted to hear you comment on was maybe the relationship of leadership and how that moves around in those three.
In the triangles. I love this question. So, if you think about an early innovation or an early stage startup, it's all about product in the context of the insight / problem. I'm a surfer who wanted to surf longer. I'm fucking around with rubber in my garage. So, it's all about the product, because if we see something that others don't, or we see it in a different way. Uber's a great example, right? We all knew that getting a cab in San Francisco sucked nuts, and not good nuts, right? But no one connected the dots the way Travis did. Thank you, however magic, Chandra, thank you, sir. Namaste. But we didn't connect all the dots, right? Even if we saw the problem. So in the beginning, there's a problem, there's an insight. The entrepreneur becomes obsessed, or the innovator becomes obsessed with going to work on that. And sometimes it's purely technical. If you talk to Diane Green, her and her husband founded